decided to do another overnighter on the way back to Almerimar, as weather was going to get sketchy again, so we figured we better get out and get back to Almerimar before the next little bit of weather came in. And I think we were about maybe 3 or 4 hours into our return journey, and we could see the fog coming in, and oh boy, did it come in. We rode through about, I don't know, 8 to 10 hours of super dense, very thick fog, very, very thick, wet, soaked us. You could see the water droplets. Actually, you can still see some of them up here, just water everywhere. It was like going through a mist. And of course, I got a little bit of PTSD because one of my most harrowing sailing experiences ever was in Long Beach, California, coming back from Catalina on Charismatic, my favorite Catalina 42 out of Harbor Light Yacht Club, where I worked as an instructor for about 10 years and charter captain. And we were coming back and the fog set in super thick. I could barely see the anchor at the bow. The fog was so thick. And off to my starboard side, of course, everybody knows that over there the Los Angeles harbor is just busy. Not quite as bad as what we saw backed up at Gibraltar, but back in those days it was still very, very busy port. And as I'm crossing the traffic lanes, which I tried to do as quickly as possible, I could hear heavy metal honking off to my starboard side, and his horn just kept getting louder and louder and louder, and it wouldn't change position. It was still in exactly the same place that I heard it for the previous 5 hours. And it got so close that when he would honk his foghorn, it felt like the rigging was shaking on the boat. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I had my nephew on board crewing for me, and he comes up and he's like, so Auntie, is this like when you see in the movies the bow coming through the fog? And I was like, yep, that's where this came from. Anyway, he hailed me on the radio and asked me what my intention was, and I was just like, I just want to get in the gate and get into my berth. So he says in very, very thick accent, he's like, okay, I'm coming in behind you. And we looked and looked and looked and looked, and we never ever saw that guy. But by the time I finally got tied up in our slip, my hands were so stuck to the wheel that it took probably several seconds before I could uncramp them. And anyway, it was one of those harrowing experiences where you're like, why am I doing this? But anyway, so when the fog came in last night, which was about that thick, I got a little anxious and PTSD, but in this case, we had the AIS, which I didn't have before. I don't even think they had it back then. They had radar, but they didn't have AIS. And so that was helpful in getting through the fog. But you don't ever know when there's a little boat out there that doesn't have AIS, that you cannot see, and the fog was so thick And it came in during the daylight hours, and it stuck with us through the night. And I was like, why do I do this? Why do I do this? Anyway, I did have to, come to surrender, because what else are you going to do, right? You're out here, you're in the fog. So I just had to have faith that we would make it through, and it's a really big ocean out here. And we were very fortunate that we didn't have any vessels anywhere close to us at all through the whole evening, or even now. We've had basically this whole Western Med to ourselves, except for the traffic jam back there by Gibraltar, but there's nobody out here. I wonder if that means something, like, are we dumb? But anyway, we're almost back to Almerimar. It's right over here where this point is coming down. I think we still have about 10, 11, 12. We still have about 4 hours to go before we get there. You can see here on the GPS that we have really no vessels out there. Everybody's within 8 or 10 miles of us, so, and it's cleared up now anyway. We had another beautiful sunrise out here on the water. And then, when you sit here and you're moving with the roll of the sea, it kind of helps you realize how much a creature of this planet that we are, and how this is home. This is home, all of it. Anyway, my watch is about to be completed, and Eric will get the last few hours in here before we pull back into Almerimar. And we'll basically tie up there for the winter, except on days where the wind is going to be in our favor to take us back to Capo de Gata, which is a really nice anchorage that we like. When the wind is favorable for us to go to Capo de Gata, we'll go there, we'll hang out for a few days again, and then come back, and then we'll head to Oregon to be with the kids for Thanksgiving. 2 out of 3 of them anyway, or I should say 4 out of 7 of them we'll be with. And then we're going to head down to Mexico and come back and do this again in April. Hopefully we won't be delayed like this year, but Inna Peace has a whole other 18 months that she can be in EU waters, and we did find out that we could put her in bond, so we're going to see if we can put her in bond while we're gone, and then that will extend an additional 6-7 months, depending on how long we're gone. So anyway, stay tuned as we wrap up our adventure for 2025. Aloha.